Reviewing Life is Strange is a little, well, strange for me, because I already covered it back when I was a real Metacritic-sanctioned game journalist, but I only got through the first 2 chapters before quitting that job to start this channel, so there's a lot of the game that I never had a chance to talk about. Life is Strange is clearly a work of passion and artistic vision, and it delivers 4 episodes worth of near-perfect interactive storytelling. Unfortunately, it's 5 episodes long, but in spite of a bad ending, it more than earns itself a silver medal. I still love this game, and I think it's well worth playing start to finish before you watch this review, which, as per usual, is going to be heavily laden with spoilers. Consider yourselves warned. At every step, Life is Strange seems to defy convention. Where most Telltale-style, episodic, choice-driven games are designed around forcing you to make snap decisions and live with the consequences, this game gives you all the time in the world to decide, and even lets you go back in time immediately if you regret something. Which is smart, because most players are just gonna do that with their save file and the pause button anyway, and acknowledging it straight off the bat saves everyone a lot of time and energy, plus it allows for more interesting storytelling. In a gaming landscape riddled with rugged adventurers, hardened soldiers, and resourceful survivalists, Life is Strange stars Max Caulfield, an exceedingly ordinary, awkward teenage girl. Even before the story proper starts, Max has a lot to deal with. She's moved away from her parents in Seattle to attend a prestigious art academy in her old hometown of Arcadia Bay, Oregon, and she's not very popular there. Around Max, the game builds up a contemporary West Coast high school, not unlike the one I went to just a few years ago. Well, as an art-focused boarding school, it's a bit more upscale than where I went, but the culture is nearly identical. Perhaps the most important thing that Life is Strange gets right is how it portrays teenagers, not necessarily in the dialogue, which is spot on most of the time, but occasionally hella cringeworthy.
Good thing my faithful minions took their sweet time bringing me a towel.
Rather, it nails what characters enjoy and how they think about the world. Max and her friends are geeks. Like geeks in a lot of contemporary TV shows, they obsess over old sci-fi movies that were clearly more important to the writer than they would be to most teens today, but they also frequently reference cultural touchstones that were a big deal for my generation, or at least me personally, like Full Metal Alchemist and Scott Pilgrim. They listen to bands that today's teenage hipsters would actually enjoy, like Mogwai and Alt-J. They even have nostalgia blinders for awful movies from my childhood.
That is a tasty plasma. Maybe I could sneak in and watch Final Fantasy Spirits Within. I don't care what anybody says, that's one of the best sci-fi films ever made.
They are also vitally immersed in online culture. Max is constantly texting throughout the day, pretty much whenever you open the pause menu, and the game conveys a lot of subtext about each of her classmates through the websites they leave open on their computers. As is the case with any high school story, Life is Strange deals with a metric fuckload of teen drama and bullying, but a lot of it happens off-screen on social media and video sharing sites. There's very little overt harassment, though there still is some, which is by and large what it's really like for kids these days. I say having been a kid these days 5 years ago. I sound like an old man. Life is Strange excels at creating a believable high school ecosystem and letting you explore it, and in that, its scope is a lot broader than something like The Walking Dead or The Wolf Among Us. Most characters seem to be going about their own lives, which intertwine with, but aren't controlled by, Max's own struggles. It's a subtle difference. In terms of systems, the games are practically identical, save for a lack of QuickTime events, but Telltale's games primarily use their characters to advance or support their stories through incidental exposition, where Life is Strange uses them to flesh out its world. I'm not saying one approach is better than the other necessarily. Life is Strange has a richer feeling world, but its pacing can be a bit awkward. However, as a narrative, it's more geared toward expanding and riffing on a theme, namely the all-too common wish that we could go back and fix our mistakes, so the ability to explore the world doesn't make it feel too unfocused. Despite the fact that it takes a backseat to the character and world building, Life is Strange actually has a pretty intriguing plotline. At the start of the game, following some low-level bullying in a photography class, Max sloughs off to the bathroom to mope, but her angst is abruptly cut off when the school's resident preppy douchebag Nathan Prescott shoots some punk chick in front of her. Distraught, Max reaches out and discovers that she can turn back time, which is fortunate because it turns out that the punk chick was her estranged childhood friend Chloe, and it would have been hard for them to catch up if she were dead. Chloe is obsessed with the disappearance of her best friend Rachel Amber, who has been missing for months. Over the course of the next 5 episodes, Max and Chloe rekindle their friendship and use Max's newfound time travel powers to investigate Rachel's disappearance appearance, but all the while an apocalyptic threat looms over their heads, seemingly connected to Max's abilities. It's a solid storyline for the most part, if a little derivative of Twin Peaks, and it starts with a bang. It says something, though, that the most memorable part of the intro is walking through the hallway and learning about the characters in Blackwell Academy on the way to that encounter. The driving force behind that is how the game uses its music. When Life is Strange lets its first notes play, you think you know what you're in for. Jonathan Morali of Sid Matters has composed a solid, vaguely indie-sounding score with a strong dramatic range. The background music lends each scene the right ambiance, but it's just that. Background music, designed to affect you subconsciously without being noticeable. Then Max pops in her headphones, and the whole thing comes alive. All the noise and gossip around her is blocked out, and the soft guitar of To All of You by Sid Matters kicks up, leaving Max alone with her thoughts as she wanders down the school hallway. It's an absolutely ingenious way of introducing the school and characters. The way that Max makes passive observations both gives essential backstory and characterizes her as awkward and shy. This is hands down one of the best sequences in any game I've ever played, and Life is Strange is full of musical moments like this. Each episode opens and closes with some sort of stylized musical montage, except for the last one due to the circumstances, and everyone is impeccably well shot and edited. I normally feel silly using filmic terms to refer to games because most games, even the ones that try, absolutely suck at applying cinematic techniques. But Life is Strange nails it, using depth of field filters and other post-processing effects to make it seem like you're looking at the world through an actual camera. It doesn't just throw these effects in for the sake of realism either. One look at the hand-painted textures will tell you that the game wasn't aiming for that. Instead, it uses them to add meaning to different shots. Often when Max and Chloe are together, the background goes out of focus, leaving them alone in their own little world. In one of my favorite early scenes where Max is lazing about in bed, hazy focus is used to make us feel her grogginess as she fights the alarm. This metaphor is paid off with a vengeance at the beginning of episode 5 when she awakens drugged and bruised up in the underground photo studio of her teacher and idol, Mark Jefferson, who turns out to be behind all of the town's druggings and disappearances. These filmic effects are also used to visualize Max's time rewinding powers and give a sense of the pain she experiences by overexerting herself, which is a very striking and effective stylistic choice. The game implies a connection between Max's knack for capturing a moment on film and her powers, and this reinforces that notion. The best use of these effects, and probably the best scene in the game overall, comes at the end of episode 2 when Max's friend Kate Marsh tries to kill herself following a campaign of bullying and Max steps in to stop her. Just when everything seems hopeless, she discovers that she can stop time, which makes the world look like a film strip frozen on a single frame. This new power lets Max reach the roof, but it absolutely drains her in the process, visualized by severe film burn, which forces you to pick your words very carefully without the safety net of an instant rewind. It's a tense and potently emotional scene that combines great filmmaking techniques and thoughtful restriction of game mechanics to heighten the drama. And regardless of the outcome, it feels justified and satisfying within the narrative you've built so far. If Max doesn't pay enough attention to Kate, there's nothing she can do to save her friend, but if she does, her love and attention is rewarded fittingly. Either way, the event and the character's reactions to it tugs at your heartstrings. So the story in Life is Strange is gorgeously presented, well written, and even well acted considering the budget, yet as I hinted at the beginning of this review, it doesn't hold together all the way to the end. After 4.25 episodes of tight, efficient storytelling culminating in a spectacularly unnerving climax where Max is captured and tortured by Mark Jefferson before using her powers to set things right, Life is Strange starts going off the rails. In an alternate timeline, she finds herself flying to San Francisco to display a photo in a gallery. Her life dream is coming true, the culprits have been caught, and everything is fine, except of course it's not. That apocalyptic storm is still coming, and when she realizes everyone she loves is in danger, she undoes her victory in order to save them. Then a bunch of stuff happens as Max tries to save Chloe from the storm, and right as they reunite, the strain of her powers finally catches up with her, tossing her into a temporally displaced nightmare world. After she fights her way through that, we learn the truth about the storm. Throughout all the episodes, Chloe almost dies a lot, only being saved by Max's powers, and it turns out that's because the universe really wants her dead. Max went against the grand plan by saving her in the bathroom, and the storm is life's way of setting that straight. Ultimately, Max has to choose between saving her friend and saving the town. The surreal way that the nightmare scenario is presented is really cool, and the game's interpretation of the butterfly effect has a lot of interesting implications, but none of it works in practice. Well, that's not entirely true. The part where the birds crash into the windows until they're covered with blood, the PT-inspired endless dorm hallway, and the part where Max goes through the game's opening backwards are all masterfully executed, but after that, not so much. The specific problem is the nightmare labyrinth Max finds herself in, comprised of disjointed pieces of environments throughout the game where she finds herself stalked by nightmarish versions of the other characters. Here we see them at their absolute worst, or at least the worst that Max sees in them. Throughout the game, every character is shown to have their good and bad sides, even, hell, especially villains like David Madsen and Victoria Chase, and the only character in the game who appears to be unimpeachable turns out to be the only one who's completely irredeemable. Max, at least as I played her, spends the entire game discovering that there are shades of light and dark to everyone, contrasts since the game loves its photo metaphors. Since the very nature of time travel basically nullifies the effect of every choice you make over the course of the game, the only real meaning these choices have is in defining who Max is, so it's extremely disappointing that when we get into her head, how she sees the world around her is absolutely fixed. Take Warren as an example, since he's a pretty divisive character. Some players find him to be creepy and obsessive, others think he's sweet and dedicated, if a bit awkward. Both interpretations are definitely valid, and based on them, Max can either push him away or decide to date him. But in her nightmare world, no matter what, he's this creepy, rapey stalker, which is a really weird way for Max to see someone she's chosen to kiss in her subconscious. Obviously, her fears about him need to come out in this scene, but in the context of that choice, wouldn't it make more sense for her to fear him cheating on her or manipulating her rather than creeping after her? The obvious explanation for why the nightmare world doesn't drastically change in response to your choices is that it would be really expensive to create multiple versions of the same level with different dialogue and assets, but that doesn't excuse the shortcomings of the scene. This is clearly intended to be one of the most striking and pivotal parts of the entire game. It even uses a unique set of mechanics that's only utilized at one other point solely for the purpose of priming players to use stealth in this climax, but instead it ends up highlighting all the ways that a game like this can be hamstrung, either by a tight budget, which seems to be the case here, or a writing team that doesn't fully understand what the choice mechanics end up meaning to players. Whatever the cause, the only reflection we get on who Max has become is delivered as clumsy exposition by a version of her from another timeline. It's a neat idea, but not handled very well. And then there's the last choice. Considering how much screen time she has, it's obvious that the game really wants to be all about Chloe and her relationship with Max, and don't get me wrong, that is interesting subject matter. Losing and reconnecting with a childhood friend only to see how much they've changed is a very powerful and universal conceit. Chloe is a nuanced character who goes through interesting struggles over the course of the game and challenges Max and the audience in a lot of ways. She and Max have a lot of history and played a big part in the development of each other's personalities. But she's not the only interesting or important character in the game by a long shot, and we don't get to explore her world of our own volition in the same way as we do Blackwell or Arcadia Bay at large. Even her house tells us more about Joyce and David than it does Chloe. I was invested in Chloe's broken home life and self-destructive acts of rebellion, but I was equally invested in Victoria and her crippling inferiority complex, Kate's struggles with the impending collapse of her good Christian identity, and even Nathan's battles with his mental issues and the stigma attached to them, which, by the way, MatPat, Life is Strange handles a lot more deftly than Until Dawn. So at the end of the game, when I'm asked to choose between Chloe and the rest of Arcadia Bay, it's no contest. Do I invalidate all of these characters' struggles, and with them about 80% of the choices I made, or let Chloe go, leaving Max with a week of happy memories with her old friend? The fact that it's a choice at all is kind of incongruous. I mean, it's hard to imagine a Max who's gone through trying to save Kate and stop Nathan and protect Alyssa from countless random projectiles just deciding to kill the entire town for one person, but that's my personal interpretation. Still, it feels like a weird thing to overtly put in the player's hands. If anything, what Max does here should be determined behind the scenes by our prior actions. As I said before, every choice made throughout the game allows the player to build up who Max is, and this would be a far more powerful way to reflect that than simply showing us our choices on a stat screen. That approach can be frustrating since it makes it difficult for players to get the ending they want at will, but whatever ending they do get would at least feel like it was saying something beyond "you can't fight fate." Another big issue is that losing Chloe in this scene doesn't really hurt all that much. Saying goodbye to her should be heartrending, and it is the first time we have to do it. In Episode 4, we find ourselves in a parallel world where Chloe is inadvertently left quadriplegic after Max saves her father from a fatal car crash. After one good day together, Chloe asks Max to help her end her suffering by assisting her in suicide, in itself an incredibly tough choice, and that scene really got to me. For me, it was the emotional climax of the entire game, but no matter how effective it was, doing the same thing twice in one story doesn't have the same effect the second time. There are other minor problems, like logical inconsistencies between gameplay where Max can take her inventory items back in time, and a certain cutscene where her ability to do so is restricted in order to force a choice, but these nitpicks don't detract from the experience nearly as much. And even with those flaws, Life is Strange is still really good. It's very sensitive and thought-provoking in how it handles themes like rape and bullying and teen suicide. It uses them as dramatic elements to fuel character growth instead of just hitting you over the head with them like some hand-fisted PSA. It's also full of nuanced characters, and it uses them both to build a world that's very engaging to explore and to tell a story that is, for the most part, very tight and compelling. It's a shame that it stumbles so much in the final stretch, but I'm still immensely glad that I played it. Normally this is where I'd try to pressure you into commenting, liking the video, and subscribing to my channel, which you should totally do, but this week I've got something special going on. Right now, a bunch of my friends and I are doing a marathon of the entire Metal Gear Solid franchise for Child's Play. You can check out the stream at MetalGearMarathon.com or twitch.tv/MetalGearMarathon. As of the moment this video goes up, we've got exactly 24 hours left to go, and that's gonna be some of the craziest shit in the marathon so far. We should be finishing up MGS4 right about now, and after that we'll be blazing through the insanity that is Revengeance, all on very little sleep, so please, if you've got some time or money handy, come and watch and support a great cause. If you missed the stream, I'll be posting a highlights reel sometime soon, so check that out when it goes live, and just so you know, in my next review I'll be taking a look back at one of my all-time favorite games, Psychonauts, which does the whole mental world thing a whole lot better than Life is Strange. As always, this is Jeff Thu, professional shitbag, signing out from my mother's basement.